I now recognize Mr. Walter for his opening statement.
Thank you. Chairwoman Green, Ranking Member Stansbury, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the honor of testifying. I'm president of the Capital Research Center, where we study nonprofits every day. Americans are proud of our nonprofit sector, which has long led the world because they love real charities that actually help people here and abroad. They don't think of the nonprofit sector as the plaything of billionaires and politicians. Yet, all too often, that is the reality of our non-governmental organizations, or NGOs. Far too many NGOs are really BGOs, basically government organizations, for two reasons. First, they get most of their money from government, not citizens. Second, they serve the big government political agenda that fights to centralize power in Washington for the benefit of the left's preferred political party. From countless egregious examples, consider the Solidarity Center. This nonprofit child of the country's largest union federation, the AFL-CIO, is chaired by the AFL-CIO's president. Solidarity Center doesn't just boost unions, it also champions DEI and climate justice. It's suing the current administration because DOGE recommended its federal gravy train end. It received over $86 million from the federal government since 2008. 61 of that $86 million was given under President Biden, doubtless encouraged by the 3 Solidarity employees who went into the Labor Department. Solidarity receives 99% of its revenue from American taxpayers. It serves the AFL-CIO, which gave 86% of its 2024 political donations to Democrats. Today's Democratic witness, Diane Yentl, is yet another powerful example of nonprofits serving big government. One of her typical tweets attacked DOGE and defended the Vera Institute of Justice, which in 2023 received 79% of its revenues from government. It's a hard-left, Soros-backed group whose priorities oppose the views of Americans' Democratic majority by advocating soft-on-crime policies and defending illegal aliens. Its biggest vendor in its last IRS filing was Blue State Digital, which began life as Barack Obama's digital campaign team and now serves the entire left. Ms. Yentl was hired by Obama at HUD, and President Biden considered her for a cabinet post. Her previous job was leading the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, an NGO that advocates for ever more federal spending by HUD and uses identity politics to justify its agenda. In her current job, leading the National Council of Nonprofits, Ms. Yentl quickly sued the Trump administration over budget cuts. What lawyers did she turn to? The Democracy Forward Foundation, whose board includes President Biden's notorious chief of staff, Ron Klain, and is chaired by Mark Elias, the Democratic super lawyer. Ms. Yentl claims the Republican tax bill would have handed, quote, unchecked power to the Trump administration to punish nonprofit orgs that don't fall in line with its ideology by labeling them as terrorist-supporting groups. Nonsense. As an honest left-leaning law professor explained in the Chronicle of Philanthropy, quote, a despot seeking to silence nonprofits would be weakened, not empowered by the legislation. No wonder nonprofit expert Bill Shambra warned that Yentl's partisanship at a major nonprofit membership group may erode public support for nonprofits by suggesting, quote, nonprofits are just like any other major institution of American society, fighting fiercely to maintain the status quo against necessary reforms. It's understandable, though not admirable, that status quo nonprofit leaders are scared by DOGE examining their government funding. They'll use an Urban Institute study designed to scare you members of Congress with statistics like government grants support nonprofits in every congressional district. No one explains why it's wonderful that so many nonprofits are as dependent on government cash as a meth addict is on methamphetamine. The same study stresses how larger nonprofits especially hoover up tax dollars. But while big nonprofits are often less effective at helping people compared to smaller neighborhood groups, they certainly are more powerful at lobbying government in the service of bigger government and the left. They're also great at suing government. This politicized pseudo-charity aimed at bloating government and seizing political power goes back decades, as when the Obama administration took money from Catholic charities and gave it to Planned Parenthood. This is a simple, ugly story of tax dollars, cronyism, and political scheming camouflaged by invoking the moving stories of the real heroes of America's charitable sector. Please don't fall for the sob stories.
Mr. Walter, you've been investigating NGO funding sources for a long time. Do you know of other examples of former elected or appointed officials in the NGO sector securing significant federal tax dollars through grants or contracts?
We've had mentioned here the $2 billion slush fund. And of course, the OMB and HUD director, Sean Donovan, has been mixed up in that. And then, of course, there have been public reports as well about the millions of dollars that the wife of Senator Sheldon Whitehouse has received from NGOs whose legislation he's helped push.
Yeah. Thank you.
And Mr. Walter, I just want to clarify a few things about Capital Research Center. This is the organization that acted as a fiscal sponsor for Ginny Thomas's nonprofit, correct?
For a project that she was one of many people involved with, yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And I think it's important at the outset to kind of level set on the language being used, because there seems to be an intentional attempt at creating a smoke screen about what we're talking about today in order to confuse people. Indeed, the ranking member tried to equate private donations going to conservative organizations with taxpayer dollars going to leftist organizations, as if that was the same thing. And even as you talk about charitable NGOs, we're all for charitable NGOs. And a lot of what you're saying is true about the vast majority of NGOs. But there's 120,000 of them, as you mentioned, and not all of them are that wonderful. And to the point, Republicans historically, decades over decades, have far outpaced Democrats in their charitable giving. As a matter of fact, Scripture gives a definition of what charity is. Each of you should give exactly what you've decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion. God loves a cheerful giver. We're all about charity, but charity isn't given at the strong arm mandate of the federal government requiring taxpayers. That's not charity. That is taxes. That's a completely different thing. And so what we're going after today is taxpayer dollars going to NGOs that are doing bad work. Indeed, so many of these organizations do have a high percentage. I appreciate what you said, Mr. Walter. You called them basically government organizations. I've thought of them in a sense as quasi-government organizations. Many of these have been stood up in a sense because it adds one more layer away from accountability on the taxpayer dollars. For example, we had Secretary Mayorkas coming here claiming plausible deniability on much of the stuff that was happening at our border. Why? Because the dollars go to an NGO who's doing the work. And so if they're giving out Sodexo cards to illegal immigrants to incentivize them coming into the United States, I don't know anything about that. It's an NGO doing that. And then when we send that through the UN as another kind of filter away from accountability, it muddies the waters even more. And so as the Department of Government Efficiency and the DOGE subcommittee here, we're working to bring transparency to this process. One of the things I wanted to mention was Endeavors. Endeavors was stood up as part of this illegal immigration scheme and this entire industry that was created. Endeavors, I think, approximately had maybe a $40 million operating budget. And you had a gentleman by the name of Lorenzen Strait, who was on the Biden Transition Committee, who suddenly found himself on the Endeavors board. And normally when a government puts out, so they put out a request for proposal, and then you're supposed to get multiple sources. Here, the government didn't even put out a request for proposal. He came and presented a proposal and got a $530 million contract from the federal government, followed by an $87 million contract. So far more, 90% or more of the income was coming from the federal government. To me, this ceases to be an NGO. Mr. Walter, you spoke to that. Could you narrow down what we're talking about here when we talk about these NGOs that are, how many are there that are like this? Where much of their income is from taxpayer dollars?
Shockingly, there are at least 35,000 NGOs that receive most of their money from government. And thank you, by the way, for mentioning that, yes, the ranking member attacked a charity that supports my organization. So I don't understand why Ms. Yentl didn't upbraid her for that.
Well, one of the things that DOGE is uncovering, it's shocking that this is, you would think that would be an issue across the lines, that you have a lack of transparency on taxpayer dollars. But it would seem that many on the left are content with the fact that this is a feature of the system, not a bug of the system. We're working to get that out. Mr.
Power-forward communities should not have $2 billion. Mr. Walter, do you agree that it is an egregious waste of taxpayer dollars to give $2 billion to a bunch of former Obama and Biden high-level employees?
Absolutely.
I'll give you a better one. Do you think that they would have gotten this money if they were not the former HUD secretary, the former OMB director, the special assistant to Obama, the former Fannie Mae head for Obama? Do you think that if we just got a random group of Americans and said, hey, you want to go, give clean energy appliances to reduce the carbon footprint of our country to a bunch of poor people? Do you want to go do that? Do you want to apply and we'll give you $2 billion? Mr. Walter, is there any world in which the EPA would have given a random group of people $2 billion?
Not at all, and that is a critical part of the NGO sector in addition to the heroes who actually do charitable work.
Now, before I yield back, let me ask the Republican witnesses if you all think Trump is right for revoking tax-exempt status for nonprofits for their political views. Raise your hand then if you think the Heritage Foundation, who wrote Project 2025, should also lose their tax-exempt status. Show of hands by the logic that's
I'm not
being
aware
applied.
of any nonprofit that's had its status revoked.
Again, the question that I'm posing is, would you please raise your hand if you think the Heritage Foundation, who wrote Project 2025, should also lose their tax-exempt status? Show of hands.
It's a perfectly reasonable speech
So
by
none
a
of you.
nonprofit.
So none of you. None.
Mr. Walter, in your opening statement and your written testimony as well, I think you addressed this. Could you inform and expound upon the issue that I see, and I always think you see, that a non-governmental organization is receiving a majority of its funding from the government? To me, that's totally contrary to the title of the organization itself.
Sure, and the statistic from Candid, which is a nonprofit group, is about 35,000 receive the majority of their funding from government. And that is obviously a dangerous thing. Now, some of them may do good work, but of course, as everybody in Washington, D.C. knows, if you're getting federal dollars, you deserve a lot of scrutiny. The idea that they should just be passed over without scrutiny is quite unreasonable.